Millionaire husband leaves wife for model. 10 years later, discovers his new wife is actually his ex's secret daughter. The grand dining room of Julian Carter's mansion was a tableau of opulence. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting a soft, warm light over the elegantly set table, adorned with fine china and sparkling silverware. The scent of roasted lamb and rosemary wafted through the air as the guests mingled, their laughter and chatter creating a symphony of social delight. Julian sat at the head of the table, a position that both elevated him and isolated him. He glanced at Celeste, his second wife, who radiated beauty in a shimmering emerald gown that accentuated her figure. Her auburn hair cascaded down her shoulders in soft waves, framing a face that was a perfect blend of kindness and youthful exuberance. Yet, despite the laughter surrounding him, Julian felt a heaviness in his chest, a persistent ache that seemed to grow with each passing moment. "Julian, darling, did you hear what Nathan just said about your latest tech venture?" Celeste leaned closer, her voice a soothing melody amidst the clamor. Julian forced a smile, his heart not in it. "Yes, I did. Nathan always knows how to spin a good story." His voice was steady, but the weight of unspoken words hung heavily between them. As the evening progressed, the conversations flowed effortlessly around him. Guests complimented Julian on his business acumen, discussing the latest innovations that had made his company a household name. But Julian's mind drifted elsewhere, back to a time when life seemed simpler, happier. He remembered Eliana, his first wife, whose laughter had once filled their home with warmth. In a flash, the scene shifted in his mind. He was transported to a sun-drenched park, where he and Eliana sat on a checkered blanket, surrounded by the fragrance of blooming flowers. They shared a picnic, laughter ringing in the air as they tossed grapes to one another, each one a small explosion of joy. Eliana's smile was radiant, illuminating her features, and her carefree spirit was infectious. "Catch this one, Julian." Eliana giggled, tossing a grape his way. He caught it effortlessly, popping it into his mouth. "You're going to regret that when I challenge you to a grape-eating contest," he teased, winking at her. "You're on," she exclaimed, her eyes sparkling with mischief. Julian's heart ached at the memory. He returned to the present, his gaze falling on a small framed photograph of Eliana that sat on the side table. Her image seemed to glow in the dim light, her expression forever captured in a moment of joy. He reached out, brushing his fingers over the glass, lost in thought. "Julian?" Celeste's voice pierced through his reverie. "Would you care to dance?" He hesitated, a knot tightening in his stomach. "Sure, of course," he replied, rising to join her. The music shifted to a slow, romantic melody, and as they moved to the center of the room, Julian felt the weight of their surroundings pressing down on him. As they swayed together, he could feel Celeste's warmth against him, yet it did little to ease the chill that settled in his heart. He caught a glimpse of their reflection in the large mirror on the wall, two people entwined. But the image felt disjointed, like a puzzle with pieces that didn't quite fit. Julian's thoughts spiraled back to Eliana, to the love that had once defined him. "Julian," Celeste whispered, pulling him from his thoughts. "Are you okay? You seem distant." He forced a smile, struggling to maintain the facade. "Just lost in thought, I suppose. About work? Or something else?" Celeste's brow furrowed with concern. She peered into his eyes, searching for the truth. "Just remembering the past," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. She nodded, understanding yet sensing the deeper layers of his emotional turmoil. "You know, it's okay to talk about it. You can share with me. I want to help you heal." Julian's heart raced. He loved Celeste, but the shadows of his past loomed large, casting doubt over their happiness. "It's complicated, Celeste. My past. It's not something I can just erase," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. "We're building a life together, Julian," she said softly, trying to bridge the gap between them. "You don't have to carry this burden alone." He met her gaze, seeing the sincerity in her eyes. "I know. And I appreciate that. But sometimes it feels like I'm living two lives. One with you, and another with memories that won't let go. Celeste stepped closer, her hand resting gently on his arm. I want to be part of your memories, Julian. I want to understand. He swallowed hard, the ache in his chest intensifying. It's not that simple. There are things I can't share without hurting you. Try me, she urged, her voice firm yet tender. I can handle it. Before he could respond, the music swelled, and the dance floor filled with other couples twirling in harmony. Julian felt the pressure of the moment of needing to choose between the life he had built and the love he had lost. He pulled Celeste closer, his heart racing as he sought solace in her embrace. But the warmth felt simultaneously comforting and suffocating. As they danced, he caught a glimpse of another couple nearby, laughing and whispering sweet nothings to one another. The woman had a striking resemblance to Ileana, and for a moment he felt a pang of longing that cut deep. The laughter faded into a dull roar, and Julian's thoughts spiraled further into the abyss of his guilt and regret. Julian, Celeste asked again, her eyes searching his. You're so quiet. I'm sorry, he said, his voice thick with emotion. It's just, sometimes I can't help but think about what I lost. Your first wife, she stated, her voice steady yet soft. I understand. Julian's heart sank. How could he explain the depth of his feelings for Eliana without shattering the fragile peace they had built? It's not just about her, he finally managed, struggling to keep the tremor from his voice. It's about everything that happened, the choices I made. Celeste pulled back slightly, her expression shifting to one of concern. You don't have to carry that alone, Julian. We can face it together. He looked down, feeling the weight of her words. But can we really? Can we survive the truths that haunt me? She took a deep breath, her determination palpable. We can try. I'm not going anywhere. I love you, and I want to understand your past so we can move forward together. Julian's heart swelled with gratitude, yet the shadows of his past cast a long and foreboding presence. He wanted to believe her, to surrender to the possibility of a future unburdened by grief, but the specter of Eliana loomed larger than ever. As the song reached its crescendo, Julian closed his eyes, allowing himself a moment of vulnerability. He wanted to let go, to embrace the life he had with Celeste, but the memories were too powerful, too intertwined with his very being. Celeste, he whispered, as the music faded into silence. I need time to sort through these feelings. I hope you can understand. She nodded, her eyes filled with compassion. Take all the time you need. Just know that I'm here for you, always. Julian took a deep breath, allowing her words to wash over him like a soothing balm. Maybe, just maybe, he could find a way to reconcile his past with the present. But for now, he was simply grateful for her presence. Even as he grappled with the complex web of his emotions, a tangled mess of love, loss, and the haunting echoes of a life he thought he had left behind. Eliana lay in her hospital bed, the sterile scent of antiseptic mingling with the faint aroma of lavender from the air freshener in the corner. The room was bathed in a soft, muted light that filtered through the curtains, casting gentle shadows on the walls. She could hear the faint beeping of the machines that monitored her health, a constant reminder of her fragile state. It had been weeks since she first entered the hospital, and every day felt like a fight against a tide of despair that threatened to pull her under. With a deep breath, she turned her attention to Dr. Sarah, her therapist, who sat in a chair by the window. Sarah was a calming presence, her demeanor gentle yet firm, as she flipped through her notes. Eliana, she began, her voice soothing, let's talk about what you're feeling. I sense a lot of unresolved pain regarding Julian. Eliana's gaze drifted to the window, where the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in hues of pink and orange. Pain is an understatement, she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. I feel betrayed. He left me, for her, and now I'm here, fighting for my life and his. He's living a fairy tale in that mansion. Dr. Sarah leaned forward, her eyes filled with understanding. It's natural to feel anger, Eliana, but I also sense that there's still love there, despite everything that's happened. Can you acknowledge that? Eliana closed her eyes, allowing the weight of her emotions to wash over her. I still love him, Sarah. I don't want to, but I do. I think about the life we had, the dreams we shared. It all feels so distant now. Tears welled in her eyes, and she blinked them away, frustrated by her vulnerability. How can I love someone who hurt me so deeply? Love and pain often coexist, especially in complicated relationships, Sarah replied gently. Perhaps it would help to express your feelings. Writing a letter to Julian could be a powerful step toward healing. Eliana's heart raced at the thought. A letter? What would I even say? I'm so angry, but I don't want to push him away even more. She paused, considering the idea. What if he doesn't care? What if he's happy with Celeste and has completely forgotten about me? That's a possibility, but it's also possible that he regrets his decision. You won't know unless you reach out. This isn't just about him. It's about you finding closure, Sarah encouraged. You deserve to voice your feelings, even if it's just for yourself. Eliana nodded slowly, the idea planting a seed of hope within her. Maybe I'll try, but it's hard to put everything into words. I feel so lost. Start with the truth, Sarah suggested. Write about your feelings, your memories, your pain, and your love. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just needs to be honest. Taking a deep breath, Eliana felt a flicker of determination. I'll do it. I'll write him a letter. The thought of pouring her heart onto the page both excited and terrified her. Would it help her heal, or would it only reopen old wounds? As the session came to an end, Eliana felt a glimmer of hope. She was still navigating the storm of her emotions, but for the first time in a while, she felt like she had some control. Maybe writing that letter would help her find clarity. Later that evening, Eliana sat at a small desk in her hospital room, the soft glow of a lamp illuminating the blank page before her. She picked up a pen, her hand trembling slightly. Words flooded her mind, but she struggled to find the right ones. Dear Julian, she began, hesitating as she tried to collect her thoughts. It feels surreal writing to you after everything that's happened. I don't know where to start or how to express what's in my heart. She paused, chewing on the end of the pen. Her heart ached as memories of their time together washed over her, their laughter, the warmth of his embrace, the dreams they once shared. I still think about you every day, she continued, the pen gliding across the paper. I think about the life we built together and how it all fell apart. It hurts so much, Julian. I feel abandoned, like a part of me was ripped away when you chose to leave. Eliana's chest tightened as she wrote, the emotions pouring out of her like a river. I want to hate you for what you did, for choosing Celeste over me, but I can't. I still love you, even when it feels wrong to do so. It's a contradiction I can't seem to escape. Tears began to fall, blurring her vision as she wrote. The words flowed freely now, each one a release of the pain she had bottled up for so long. I thought I could move on, that time would heal the wounds, but it hasn't. Seeing you with her, it's like a dagger to my heart. I want to be happy for you, but all I feel is this emptiness inside. Do you even think about me? Do you remember the life we had? Eliana paused, taking a deep breath as she wiped her tears away. I wish things were different. I wish I could go back to that time when we were happy, when we were in love. But I know that's impossible. I don't know if I can ever forgive you for leaving, but I want to try. I want to find peace. As she wrote the final lines, Eliana felt a sense of catharsis. I hope you find happiness, Julian, even if it's not with me. I hope you know that I still care about you, despite the pain. It's hard to let go, but I'm trying. She signed a letter and set the pen down, her heart feeling a little lighter. It was a small step toward healing, even if it was just for her. After she finished writing, Eliana looked out the window, watching the stars begin to twinkle in the night sky. The world outside felt so distant, yet somehow she felt a connection to it, as if the universe was reminding her that life continued, even in the face of pain. "Thank you, Sarah," she whispered softly to herself, knowing that she couldn't change the past, but she could choose how to move forward. The next day, as she prepared to meet with Dr. Sarah again, Eliana felt a mix of anxiety and anticipation. She had decided not to send the letter just yet. She wanted to reflect on it more, to ensure that it truly captured her feelings. When Sarah entered the room, her warm smile welcomed Eliana. "How did it go with the letter?" Eliana hesitated, her gaze drifting to the letter lying folded on the bedside table. "I wrote it," she said, her voice trembling with uncertainty. "But I haven't sent it. I'm scared of what might happen if I do." "That's completely understandable," Sarah replied. "Writing it is a huge step. You're processing your emotions, and that's what matters. What do you feel now that you've written it?" "I feel lighter, I guess," Eliana admitted, her fingers nervously playing with the edge of the blanket. "But I still don't know if I want him to read it. What if he doesn't care? What if it just opens old wounds?" "Those are valid concerns," Sarah acknowledged. "But the letter is also a way for you to express your feelings and reclaim your voice. It's about your journey, not just about Julian." Eliana took a deep breath, feeling a mixture of relief and anxiety. "You're right. I need to focus on myself and my healing. It's just hard to let go of the past. That's why it's a journey, Eliana. Healing takes time, and it's okay to take it one step at a time," Sarah reassured her. "Keep writing if it helps you. You might find clarity in your words." As the session continued, Eliana felt a sense of empowerment. She might not have all the answers yet, but she was beginning to understand that her feelings mattered. She had the power to shape her own narrative, and that realization was the first step toward healing from the pain that had haunted her for so long. With a newfound sense of purpose, Eliana knew she would continue to write, to explore her emotions, and perhaps one day she would find the courage to send that letter, to reach out to Julian and confront the tangled web of love and loss that bound them together. Julian stood by the large bay window of his opulent Beverly Hills mansion, gazing out at the sprawling city below. The sun was setting, casting a golden hue over everything, but the beauty of the view was lost on. "Go," he whispered to the empty room, his heart aching with regret. He began to read, each word resonating with the pain and joy of their past. Eliana had written about her dreams, her fears, and the moments that had shaped their relationship. "I feel so lost without you, Julian. Every day is a reminder of what we had," he read aloud, his voice breaking. "I wish I could turn back time, to erase the mistakes that have led us here." Tears welled in Julian's eyes as he continued to read. Eliana had poured her heart into these pages, revealing vulnerabilities he had never fully understood. "I worry that I'm not enough for you, that I'll never be the woman you deserve." He closed the diary, overwhelmed with emotion. The memories flooded back Eliana's laughter, her smile, the way she had looked at him with unwavering love. He had traded that for a life he thought would be better, but all he had found was emptiness. "Julian?" Celeste's voice broke through his reverie, and he quickly wiped his tears away. "Are you okay?" "Yeah," he replied, not meeting her gaze. "Just looking for a book." "Do you want to talk?" she asked, her tone gentle yet probing. "Not right now," he said, his voice hoarse. Celeste stepped closer, concern etched on her face. "Julian, I can see that something is bothering you. Please let me in." He sighed, feeling the weight of her gaze on him. "It's complicated, Celeste. I just need some time to think." "Is this about Eliana?" she asked suddenly, her expression shifting to one of understanding. Julian's heart raced. He had tried to keep his past buried, but it was impossible to ignore. "It's not about her. It's about me. I don't know how to deal with everything right now." Celeste's eyes softened and she stepped closer, her hand brushing against his arm. "You don't have to go through this alone. I want to help you, but you have to let me in." He looked down, his heart aching. The truth was, he didn't know how to let her in. The guilt he felt over Eliana was a barrier he couldn't breach. "Just give me a little time," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "Okay," Celeste replied, her voice steady. "But I'm here whenever you're ready." Julian nodded, grateful for her patience. But the shadows of doubt and guilt lingered in his heart. He spent the rest of the evening in turmoil, the weight of his choices pressing down on him like a heavy shroud. As the night deepened, he wandered back to the library, unable to resist the pull of Eliana's diary. He opened it again, desperate for answers, for solace, for a glimpse of the love he had sacrificed. The words danced before him, each one a reminder of the life he had left behind. "Julian," he read again, "I believe that love can conquer all, but sometimes it feels like I'm fighting a battle I can't win." With every word, he felt the walls closing in around him. He was caught in a web of his own making, and he didn't know how to escape. Hours later, as he finally closed the diary for the last time, he realized he could no longer ignore the truth. Eliana was still in his heart, and the love he felt for her was intertwined with the life he had built with Celeste. With a heavy heart and a storm of emotions swirling within him, Julian knew he had a choice to make. He could either continue to hide from his past, allowing the shadows to consume him, or he could confront the truth and the people he loved. As he turned off the lights in the library, he felt a flicker of determination ignite within him. Tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow, he would face the music, no matter how painful it might be. Celeste stood in the dimly lit attic of her father's mansion, the air thick with dust and memories. She had always been drawn to this part of the house, a place where the past lingered in the shadows. Today, however, there was a sense of urgency. The weight of her father's recent mood shifts pressed heavily upon her, and she needed answers. As she rummaged through old boxes, her heart raced with a mix of anticipation and dread. "Why do I feel like I'm missing something?" she murmured to herself, her hands brushing against the faded fabric of a quilt. The attic was cluttered with relics of a bygone era-old furniture, photographs, and stacks of books that had long since collected dust. But what caught her eye was a small, weathered box tucked away in the corner. It was adorned with intricate carvings, and she felt an inexplicable pull toward it. Kneeling, she opened the box, revealing a trove of photographs. As she sifted through them, her breath caught in her throat. There, among the faded images, was a photograph of a young woman, her mother, Eliana, standing by a lake, her smile radiant and carefree. Celeste's heart ached at the sight. She had seen this photograph before, but there was something different about it now. A longing tugged at her, a desire to understand the woman in the picture and the life she had lived. "Dad always said she was beautiful," she whispered, cradling the photograph in her hands. But he never talked about her much. As if the house had ears, a chill swept through the attic, and Celeste felt a shiver run down her spine. She flipped the photograph over, revealing a date scribbled in Eliana's elegant handwriting. Summer 2003. That year was significant. It was the year Julian had left Eliana for Celeste's mother. A knot formed in her stomach, and she could no longer ignore the questions swirling in her mind. "Celeste," Julian's voice echoed from the hallway, pulling her from her thoughts. She quickly tucked the photograph back into the box and stood up, brushing off her knees. "Yes, Dad," she called, her voice a mix of excitement and apprehension. "I'm heading out for a meeting. Just wanted to check in on you," he replied, stepping into the attic. His presence filled the room, and Celeste felt a familiar warmth, but there was also a shadow of something unspoken between them. "Are you okay?" she asked, studying his face closely. "You've seemed distant lately." Julian sighed deeply, running a hand through his hair. "It's just work, sweetie. You know how it is." Celeste narrowed her eyes, unconvinced. "It's more than that. I can tell. Is it about Mom?" At the mention of Eliana, Julian's expression shifted. He looked away, his gaze landing on the stacks of books lining the shelves. Your mother. She's a complicated subject. Complicated or painful? Celeste pressed, taking a step closer to him. I found some old photos of her today. She looked happy. Did you ever really love her? The question hung in the air, heavy and charged. Julian's jaw tightened, and for a moment, Celeste feared she had crossed a line. I loved her once, he finally admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. But life isn't that simple. Things changed. Changed how? Celeste insisted, her heart racing. You left her for another woman. You married Celeste. And now you pretend like Eliana never existed. Celeste. Julian began, frustration evident in his tone. It's not like that. I made choices, and those choices came with consequences. I thought I was doing what was best for everyone involved. Celeste shook her head, anger bubbling to the surface. What about what was best for Mom? You hurt her. The tension in the room thickened, and Julian's expression shifted from frustration to pain. I know I did. I've carried that guilt for years. But I can't change the past, and I can't change how I feel about you now. No, you can't, she replied, her voice trembling. But you don't get to erase her from our lives, Dad. She's still a part of who I am. Julian looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of sorrow and understanding. I never wanted to erase her, Celeste. I thought it would be easier for you not to know. I thought you'd have a better life without that baggage. Better life? Celeste exclaimed, her voice rising. What do you think I've been feeling? I've been living in the shadow of someone I barely know, and now I'm starting to question everything about myself. Who am I without my mother's story? The silence that followed was deafening. Julian ran a hand over his face, clearly grappling with the weight of her words. I didn't know you felt this way. I thought I was protecting you. Protecting me? Or protecting yourself? Celeste shot back, feeling the heat of the confrontation. What if I want to know more about her? What if I want to learn about my past? Then you should, Julian conceded, his voice softening. But be prepared for the truth. It's not as simple as it seems. Celeste felt a mix of triumph and uncertainty. Then help me find out. Help me learn about her, about you, about everything. Julian hesitated, his eyes clouded with doubt. I don't know if I can face it all again. I thought I had left it behind. Maybe it's time to face it, she said quietly, her resolve strengthening. You owe it to her, to me, and to yourself. As they stood in the attic, the air heavy with unspoken words, Celeste felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps they could navigate these murky waters together, uncovering the secrets that had long been buried. But as Julian turned away, his expression unreadable, she couldn't shake the feeling that the answers she sought might lead to more pain than healing. Later that evening, Celeste found herself seated at the dining room table, the old photograph spread out before her. She studied her mother's face, searching for clues about the woman who had shaped her life in ways she never fully understood. The vibrant smile in those photographs seemed to beckon her, urging her to dig deeper. Why did you leave me? She whispered to the empty room, her voice barely above a breath. Why didn't you fight for me? Her phone buzzed beside her, breaking the heavy silence. It was a message from a number she didn't recognize. Curiosity piqued. She opened it, revealing a simple text. I know about your mother. We need to talk. Celeste's heart raced. She didn't know who this person was or what they knew, but something inside her stirred a mix of fear and anticipation. She glanced toward the hallway, half expecting her father to walk in and interrupt her thoughts, but he remained absent, lost in his own demons. What do you know? She typed back, her fingers trembling as she hit send. The response came almost immediately. More than you can imagine. Meet me tomorrow at the cafe on Willow Street. As she stared at the screen, Celeste felt a surge of determination. She was no longer willing to hide from the truth. It was time to confront the shadows of her past, even if it meant unraveling the secrets that bound her family together in ways she never could have anticipated. The journey ahead promised to be fraught with danger and revelations. But for the first time in her life, she felt ready to face it all head-on. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm golden hue over the beachside restaurant where Julian and Celeste had chosen to dine. The sound of waves crashing against the shore created a soothing backdrop, but the atmosphere felt anything but tranquil for Julian. As they settled into their seats, he attempted to engage Celeste in light conversation, hoping to bridge the growing distance between them. "Isn't this place beautiful?" he said, forcing a smile. "The seafood here is supposed to be exceptional." Celeste glanced at the menu but didn't respond immediately. Her mind was elsewhere, swirling with thoughts that had been haunting her for days. "Yeah, it's nice," she replied absently, tracing her finger along the edge of the table. Julian watched her closely, the concern etched on his face. He could sense that something was troubling her, and it worried him. "Celeste, you seem a bit distant tonight. Is everything okay?" "It's just, I've been thinking," she said slowly, her voice. "Someone else's choices. You deserve to heal." Eliana sighed deeply, the weight of her emotions pressing down on her. "I know that, but it hurts so much. I still love him, despite everything. Is that even normal? Love can be complicated, especially when it's mixed with pain and loss," Sarah replied thoughtfully. "Maybe writing about your feelings could help. Have you considered writing him a letter? It could be a way to express what you're going through." Eliana's eyes widened at the suggestion. A letter? To Julian? The thought both thrilled and terrified her. What would I even say? Wouldn't that just open old wounds? "It might," Sarah acknowledged, "but it could also be a step toward closure. You can express your anger, your love, your confusion, whatever you feel. It's about you, not him." Eliana contemplated the idea, her heart racing at the possibility. "I could write everything I've wanted to say for so long, but what if he never reads it? What if it just gets tossed aside? Then it's still a cathartic exercise for you," Sarah assured her. "You're not writing it for him. You're writing it for yourself. You deserve to voice your pain, to process your emotions." With a tentative nod, Eliana agreed. "I'll think about it. Maybe it could help." The conversation lingered in her mind long after Sarah left the room. The idea of putting her feelings into words felt daunting yet liberating. She reached for the small notebook on her bedside table, its cover worn from use. Flipping to a fresh page, she hesitated, the pen hovering above the paper. "Dear Julian," she began, the ink flowing as her thoughts spilled forth. "It feels surreal to write to you after all this time. I've spent countless nights thinking about you, about us. Why did you leave? Did our love mean nothing to you?" Each word felt like a release, a way to confront the pain that had festered within her. As she continued to write, her emotions poured onto the page her love, her anger, her sense of betrayal. "I still love you, Julian. I don't know how to let go of that love, but I feel so lost without you. You were my everything." Tears streamed down her cheeks, blurring the ink on the paper. "But I can't forgive you. Not yet. I don't know if I ever will." Eliana paused, her heart racing. The weight of her words felt heavy, but there was a sense of relief that came with expressing them. She closed the notebook, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "I'll finish it later," she whispered to herself, placing it back on the table. Days passed, and the hospital room became a cocoon of reflection. Eliana's body was healing, but her heart felt more fractured than ever. The thought of sending the letter nagged at her, a gentle push toward confronting her past. One afternoon, as she stared out the window, lost in thought, Sarah returned. "How have you been, Eliana?" she asked, her tone light but attentive. "I've been writing," Eliana admitted, a hint of pride in her voice. "About Julian, about everything." "That's wonderful," Sarah encouraged. "How does it feel to express those emotions?" "It feels terrifying and freeing at the same time. I keep thinking, what if he doesn't care? What if he's moved on completely?" "Those thoughts are natural," Sarah said empathetically. But your healing is what's most important right now. You're taking control of your narrative, and that's a powerful step. Eliana nodded, absorbing Sarah's words. I think I'm starting to understand that. It's just hard to let go of the hope that things could be different. Hope can be a double-edged sword, Sarah replied. It can motivate you, but it can also trap you in a cycle of longing. Try to focus on the present and your own healing journey. Eliana sighed, the weight of the conversation settling over her. You're right. I just wish it didn't hurt so much. Pain is part of healing, Eliana, Sarah offered gently. But remember, you're not alone in this. You have people who care about you, who want to see you thrive. Focus on that support. In the silence that followed, Eliana felt a flicker of determination ignite within her. Perhaps she could confront her pain, not just through her words, but by embracing the possibility of healing. As the sun began to set, casting golden rays into her room, she picked up the notebook again. Maybe I can write him a letter, she murmured to herself, the idea taking root in her heart. A letter that tells him how I really feel. A letter that might even help me move forward. With renewed resolve, she opened to the page she had started and began to write once more. Dear Julian, she wrote, I am still here, fighting through the pain you left behind. I'm learning to embrace my own worth, to find my own path. I hope that one day I can forgive you. For now, I need to heal. Each word felt like a step toward reclaiming her power, a testament to her journey of self-discovery. As the ink dried, Eliana felt a sense of hope wash over her, hope that perhaps, in time, she would find peace, regardless of what lay ahead with Julian. Julian Carter sat in the plush leather chair of his office, the warm glow of the late afternoon sun streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows of his Beverly Hills mansion. The sprawling city below sparkled like a field of diamonds, but he felt none of the joy that the view should have inspired. Instead, a gnawing sense of discontent tugged at him, a stark contrast to the life he had meticulously built after leaving Eliana. He stared at his laptop screen, the cursor blinking impatiently, a reminder of the emails he had to send, the meetings he had to attend. Yet, all he could think about was the weight of his choices that had led him to this moment. His phone buzzed on the desk, snapping him out of his reverie. It was a message from Robert, his longtime mentor and friend, asking if they could meet for coffee. Julian glanced at the clock. He had an hour before his next conference call. He quickly typed a response, agreeing to meet at their usual spot down the street. As he grabbed his jacket, he felt a fleeting sense of hope. Perhaps Robert could offer him some clarity, or at least an escape from the turmoil that had become his daily existence. At the cafe, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, mingling with the sweet scent of pastries. Julian spotted Robert at a corner table, his silver hair shining under the overhead lights. He looked up and smiled, gesturing for Julian to join him. Hey, Julian, good to see you, Robert said, his voice warm and inviting. Good to see you too, Robert, Julian replied, taking a seat and running a hand through his hair, a nervous habit he had developed over the years. Thanks for meeting me on such short notice. Always, Robert said, pouring a cup of coffee for Julian. You look like you've been carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders. What's going on? Julian hesitated, searching for the right words. It's complicated. Celeste and I, there's a lot happening, and I just feel lost. I thought starting over would make everything easier, but it hasn't. Robert leaned in, his expression serious. You know that starting over doesn't erase the past, right? You can't pretend like it never happened. I know, Julian said, his voice low, but I thought I could build a future without dragging the past along with me. I thought I could be happy. Robert's brow furrowed. And what makes you think you can't be happy now? Because I can't shake this guilt, Julian confessed, his hands clenching around the warm mug. Eliana? She's sick. I found out through a mutual friend. I can't help but feel responsible for all the pain I caused her. Robert studied Julian for a moment, his gaze unwavering. Are you sure it's guilt you're feeling? Or is it something deeper? Maybe a longing for something you've lost? What do you mean? Julian asked, his heart racing. Julian, Eliana was a huge part of your life. You left her for a reason, but that doesn't mean you stopped loving her. You replaced one love with another, but that doesn't mean the first one just disappears. Julian's mind raced. I thought I could move on. I thought I was doing the right thing by marrying Celeste. Did you? Robert challenged, his voice firm. Or did you just think you could bury your past and pretend it didn't happen? Julian sighed heavily, the weight of Robert's words settling deep within him. You're right. I've been trying to outrun my own shadow. Celeste reminds me of Eliana, and I can't shake that feeling. It's like I'm stuck in this loop, and I don't know how to break free. Robert nodded, understanding the turmoil that swirled in Julian's heart. Have you talked to Celeste about this? Not really, Julian admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't want to hurt her. She's been through enough, and I don't want to drag her into my mess. Julian, pretending everything is fine will only create more distance between you two, Robert advised. You need to be honest with her. She deserves to know what you're feeling, and it might help you both. What if she hates me for it? Julian asked, anxiety creeping in. Then at least you'll know where you stand, Robert replied. You can't control how she reacts, but you can control your honesty. And sometimes, the truth can be liberating. Julian took a deep breath, steeling himself against a wave of emotions that threatened to overwhelm him. You're right. I need to face this. I need to confront my feelings, not just for Eliana, but for Celeste too. Good, Robert said, a hint of relief in his voice. Just remember, you're not the only one who's been affected by your choices. Celeste has a story too. You might be surprised by what she feels. As they finished their coffee, the conversation shifted back to business, but Julian's mind remained fixated on Robert's words. He was grateful for the clarity his friend provided, but was still wrestling with the storm within him. He paid the bill, thanked Robert for the talk, and headed back to his office, a newfound determination coursing through his veins. Once home, Julian found himself aimlessly wandering through the mansion, the walls echoing with memories of laughter and love, but also with the ghosts of choices he wished he could take back. He entered his study and saw the framed photographs on the wall, one of him and Eliana at the beach, their smiles radiant. Another of him and Celeste at a charity gala, their faces beaming with forced happiness. The contrast struck him hard. He sank into the leather chair, staring at the framed photo of Eliana that sat on his desk. In that moment, he felt an overwhelming urge to reach out to her, to see her, to understand the depth of what he had lost and what he might still salvage. But as he looked at the photo, a thought crossed his mind. Was it too late? The phone buzzed again, pulling him from his thoughts. It was a message from Robert, reminding him not to lose sight of the present while he was wrestling with the past. Remember, Robert had written, the future is still unwritten. Don't let it be dictated by your regrets. Julian took a deep breath, contemplating his next move. He thought about Celeste, about the way she had looked at him recently, the questions lingering in her eyes when they spoke of Eliana. She deserved the truth, and he needed to confront his own emotions. With newfound resolve, he picked up his phone and dialed Celeste's number. As it rang, he felt a mix of anxiety and hope. He was ready to face whatever came next, ready to embrace the complexity of love and family, even if it meant unraveling the tightly knit fabric he had tried to weave around his life. Hello, Celeste answered, her voice bright but laced with curiosity. Celeste, can we talk? Julian asked, his heart racing. Of course. Is her telling me that she wanted to create a life filled with love and happiness? Celeste leaned forward, intrigued. Did she ever talk about my father? About Julian? A shadow crossed Mrs. Thompson's face. Eliana loved Julian deeply. Their relationship was intense, filled with passion but also pain. When he left, it broke her heart. She never truly moved on, even if she tried to appear strong. Do you think she ever stopped loving him? Celeste asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't think so. You see, love isn't always easy to let go of, especially when it's intertwined with so many memories, Mrs. Thompson replied, her gaze drifting to the window as if she were lost in memories of her own. But Eliana made choices, sacrifices. She wanted to protect you, Celeste. You were her light. Celeste felt a knot form in her throat. Protect me from what? From the pain of that loss, from the shadows of the past, Mrs. Thompson said gently. Eliana believed that if she distanced herself from Julian and the life they had, it would be easier for you to grow up without the weight of their history. As the conversation unfolded, Celeste learned about Eliana's dreams, her struggles, and her fierce love for her daughter. Each revelation felt like a puzzle piece falling into place, yet the more she learned, the more questions arose. Can you tell me more about their relationship? Celeste asked, her curiosity piqued. What really happened between them? Mrs. Thompson sighed, her expression somber. Eliana was devoted to him, but Julian was ambitious. He was always chasing after success, and sometimes that meant sacrificing personal connections. When he left, it wasn't just a loss. It felt like a betrayal to her. Celeste processed this information, her heart heavy with the weight of her mother's pain. Did he ever come back? Did he know about me? I don't think he knew at first. Eliana kept it a secret to protect you and herself, Mrs. Thompson replied, her voice filled with compassion. But in her heart, she always hoped he would return, that he would see the life she built for you. What do you think she would have wanted for me? Celeste asked, her voice trembling with emotion. She would have wanted you to be happy, to find your own path, and to know the love she had for you, Mrs. Thompson said, her eyes brimming with tears. She wanted to shield you from pain, but she also wanted you to know the truth about where you came from. Celeste felt a surge of determination. I need to know everything, Mrs. Thompson. I need to understand who I am. Then let's keep this conversation going. Eliana's story is still unfolding, and you deserve to know it all, Mrs. Thompson replied, her voice filled with encouragement. As they continued to talk, Celeste felt a sense of liberation wash over her. Each shared memory, each story about her mother, was like a thread weaving together the fabric of her identity. She realized that her journey of self-discovery wasn't just about understanding Eliana's past. It was also about embracing her own future. After their meeting, Celeste walked through the streets of Beverly Hills, the sun shining brightly above her. She felt different, empowered. Her mother had loved her fiercely, and that love was the foundation of her existence. Yet, there was still a lingering sense of confusion about her connection to Julian. She found herself at a small park, where children played and laughter echoed in the air. Sitting on a bench, she pulled out her phone and scrolled through the photos of Eliana, her heart aching with a mixture of love and sadness. The woman who had given her life had also lived a life filled with secrets and sacrifices. Taking a deep breath, Celeste decided she would confront Julian. She needed to understand the truth of their connection, to face the shadows of their shared past. The thought both excited and terrified her, but it was a necessary step in her journey of self-discovery. As the sun began to set, casting a golden hue over everything, Celeste felt a renewed sense of purpose. The path ahead was uncertain, but she was ready to walk it armed with the knowledge of her mother's love and the desire to uncover the truth about her own identity. Julian stood in the dimly lit study, the weight of the evening pressing down on his shoulders. The mahogany desk was cluttered with papers, but his mind was far from the work he usually immersed himself in. Instead, it was occupied by the swirling thoughts of Celeste and the revelations he had stumbled upon. He had spent the last few days sifting through old photographs and documents, trying to piece together the threads of the past that seemed to be unraveling right before him. As he paced the room, the door creaked open and Celeste entered, her expression a mix of curiosity and concern. She had sensed his distance, a growing gap that seemed to widen with every passing day. "Julian," she started hesitantly, her voice tinged with apprehension. "I thought we could talk about what's been going on lately." He turned to face her, his heart heavy. "Celeste, I've been thinking about us, about everything." He ran a hand through his hair, a habit he had developed over the years when he felt overwhelmed. "There are things I need to say, and things I need to understand." She stepped further into the room, her brow furrowing. "I've been feeling it too. There's this tension between us, and I don't know how to bridge the gap." She paused, searching his eyes for answers. "It's like there's something unspoken, something that's been hanging in the air." "Exactly," Julian replied, his voice low and serious. "I've been digging into Ileana's past, and I can't shake this feeling that there's a connection between us that goes deeper than I ever imagined." Celeste's breath caught in her throat as she crossed her arms defensively. "What do you mean? What did you discover?" He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "I found some old letters, photographs, things that made me realize how little I knew about Ileana's life after I left her. She had dreams, hopes, and a life that I shattered when I walked away." He paused, taking a deep breath to steady himself. "And then there's you. The more I think about it, the more I see pieces of her in you." Celeste's face paled, and she took a step back. "What are you saying, Julian? Are you suggesting—" "I don't know yet," he admitted, frustration creeping into his voice. "But there's this nagging feeling that you might be connected to her in ways I can't fully comprehend. It's as if the universe is throwing signs at me, and I can't ignore them any longer." Celeste's heart raced as she processed his words. "Are you saying you think I'm somehow related to Ileana? That I'm her daughter?" The idea sent shivers down her spine, and she felt a whirlwind of emotions crash over her. "I can't say for sure," Julian replied, his eyes searching hers for understanding. "But the more I learn, the more it feels like there's a truth lurking just beneath the surface. I need to know, Celeste. I need to know who you really are." Celeste clenched her jaw, her mind racing with the implications of his words. "Do you really want to go down this road, Julian? What if we find out something that changes everything? What if it's better left alone? Can we afford to ignore it?" Julian's voice was firm, but there was a hint of desperation in his eyes. "You deserve to know your true identity, just as I deserve to confront my past. I can't keep pretending everything is fine when it feels like I'm living a lie." She turned away, feeling the heat of tears prick at her eyes. "I've spent my whole life trying to figure out who I am, and now you want to shatter the little stability I have left." Her voice cracked, and she fought to maintain her composure. "What if I find out I'm just a mistake, a product of your betrayal?" "Celeste, please." Julian reached out, his hand brushing against her arm gently. "You're not a mistake. You're a beautiful, strong woman who deserves to know the truth. I want to support you through this, no matter what we discover." She shook her head, struggling with the torrent of feelings swirling within her. "I don't know if I can handle this right now. I built my life around you, around this facade of normalcy. If I find out I'm connected to Ileana, what does that mean for us?" "It means we face it together," he said, his voice softening. "We can't run from the past, Celeste. It's a part of who we are, and it shapes our future. But we can choose how we deal with it." Celeste took a deep breath, trying to steady her racing heart. "What if I'm not ready to confront this? What if I can't live with the truth?" "Then we take it one step at a time," Julian replied earnestly. "We don't have to rush into anything, but we owe it to ourselves to explore this, to find out what it means for our lives. I promise you, I'll be there every step of the way." She looked up into his eyes, searching for the sincerity she desperately needed to believe. "And if the truth is too painful, what if it tears us apart? Then we deal with that too," he said, determination etched on his face. "But living in uncertainty is not a life worth living. You deserve clarity, Celeste. We both do." The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken fears and hopes. Celeste's mind raced as she weighed the risks of uncovering the truth against the comfort of ignorance. She had always felt a void in her life, a nagging sense that she didn't quite belong. What if Julian was right? What if she was connected to Ileana in a way that changed everything? Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. Okay, let's find out the truth, but I need you to promise me something. Anything, Julian replied, his gaze unwavering. Promise me that no matter what we discover, we'll face it together. I won't be able to handle this alone. I promise, he said, a sense of relief washing over him. We'll face it together. As they stood there, the weight of their decision hung in the air, heavy yet liberating. Celeste felt a flicker of hope ignite within her. Perhaps uncovering the truth would lead her to a deeper understanding of herself, even if it meant confronting the painful legacy of her past. Let's start with the photographs, she suggested, her voice steadier now. You said you found some old letters? Maybe they'll give us a clue. Julian nodded, his resolve strengthening. I'll get them. I have a feeling they might hold the key to unraveling this mystery. He turned to leave but paused, looking back at her with a glimmer of hope in his eyes. Whatever happens, remember that you're not alone in this. I won't forget, Celeste replied, her heart racing with a mix of anticipation and dread. As Julian left the room, she felt the ground shift beneath her feet, a new journey beginning to unfold. The shadows of the past loomed large, but she was ready to step into the light of discovery, no matter how daunting it might be. The evening air in Beverly Hills was thick with anticipation as Eliana drove toward the imposing mansion that had once been her home. The towering structure loomed ahead, a stark reminder of the life she had once shared with Julian. Her heart raced as she thought about the letter she had sent him, a letter full of vulnerability and raw emotion. It was a letter that would either bridge the chasm that had formed between them or deepen the wounds of their shared past. As she parked the car, Eliana took a moment to steady her breathing. The memories flooded back, laughter echoing in the halls, the smell of Julian's cologne mingling with the scent of fresh blooms from the garden. She could almost hear Celeste's laughter, a sound that was both foreign and familiar. The thought of her daughter sent a wave of warmth through her, but it was quickly overshadowed by the fear of the confrontation that awaited her. Inside the mansion, Julian and Celeste were engaged in a quiet conversation, their tones low as they shared a moment of intimacy. Julian's eyes flickered toward the door, a subconscious awareness that something monumental was about to happen. Celeste, sensing the shift in his demeanor, looked at him curiously. "What's wrong?" she asked, tilting her head slightly. "I don't know," Julian replied, running a hand through his hair. "I just have this feeling, like something's shifting." His voice was tinged with uncertainty, a feeling that had been creeping into his life since he had received Eliana's letter. It was a sensation of impending change, something he both craved and feared. Before Celeste could respond, the door swung open, revealing Eliana. The moment hung in the air, charged with emotion. Julian's breath caught in his throat, and Celeste turned, her heart racing at the sight of the woman who had once been a central figure in her life. The silence stretched on, heavy with unspoken words and unresolved feelings. "Eliana," Julian finally managed, his voice barely above a whisper. The sight of her brought a rush of memories both sweet and painful. He hadn't seen her in years, and yet the connection felt as strong as ever. Eliana took a tentative step inside, her eyes darting between Julian and Celeste. I hope I'm not interrupting," she said, her voice trembling slightly. The weight of the moment pressed down on her. She could feel the tension crackling in the air. Celeste, feeling the tension surge, took a step forward. "No, you're not interrupting. We were just talking," she said, her tone attempting to be reassuring, but the uncertainty lingered. "About everything." "Everything," Eliana echoed, her gaze shifting back to Julian. "I received your letter. It felt like a lifetime since we last spoke." The words hung in the air, fraught with the complexity of their history. Julian stepped closer, his expression earnest. "I've been thinking about so much. About us, about everything that happened. I'm so sorry, Eliana. I never wanted to hurt you. His voice cracked, revealing the vulnerability he had carried for years. Eliana swallowed hard, emotions flooding her. You hurt me, Julian. You broke my heart, and it took so long to piece myself back together. But I also understand that life is complicated. Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears, a mixture of pain and understanding. Celeste looked between them, her heart pounding in her chest. She felt like an outsider, yet she couldn't shake the sense of belonging that had begun to form. I think we all have things to say, she said softly, stepping back as if to give them space while still wanting to be part of the moment. Eliana turned to Celeste, her expression softening. You must be Celeste, she said, her voice laced with curiosity and a hint of caution. I've heard so much about you. Celeste nodded slowly. I know about you too, or at least I thought I did. Her heart raced as the implications of their connection began to settle in. I didn't know how deep our connection really is. Eliana's gaze dropped to the floor, her mind racing. I didn't come here to create tension. I came to find closure for myself and for you both. She paused, taking a deep breath. I came to tell you that I love you, Julian. I always have, even after everything. The admission hung heavily in the air, and Julian's heart ached at her words. Eliana, he said, struggling to find the right words. The guilt flooded back, but this time it felt different. It felt like a chance for healing. Eliana continued, her voice steadying. But I also know that we can't go back to what we had. I want you to be happy, truly happy. And if that means moving on, then I have to accept it. There was a bittersweet clarity in her eyes as she spoke. Celeste felt a surge of emotion at Eliana's words. I never wanted to come between. You too. I didn't choose this life. It chose me. Her voice trembled as she spoke, the weight of her identity crashing down on her. I just want to understand who I am in this story. Julian stepped forward, his heart racing. Celeste, you are my daughter. You have always been a part of my life, whether I understood it or not. The words flowed out of him, a mixture of love and confusion. Eliana looked at Celeste, her heart aching for her daughter. You are my child, Celeste. I made choices to protect you, to give you a life away from the pain. She reached out, her hand trembling as she touched Celeste's arm. But I realize now that those choices may have deprived you of knowing your true self. Celeste stepped back, her mind racing as the revelation hit her like a tidal wave. You're saying, I'm your daughter? Her voice cracked as she processed the enormity of the moment. All this time I never knew. Julian felt the air thicken with tension as he watched Celeste's reaction. I didn't want to believe it either, but the truth is undeniable. He took a deep breath, looking at Eliana with a mix of regret and understanding. We've all been caught in this web of secrets and lies. Eliana nodded, her expression softening. I never wanted to keep you apart, Celeste. I thought I was protecting you. I made sacrifices I thought were for the best. She looked at Julian, her voice barely a whisper. I didn't want you to suffer, Julian. I thought leaving would spare you both pain. The three of them stood in a triangle of emotions: love, hurt, and the aching desire for connection. Finally, Celeste stepped forward, tears streaming down her face. I just wanted to know who I was. I wanted to feel like I belonged. In that moment, Julian and Eliana moved toward her, enveloping her in a collective embrace. The years of pain and misunderstanding began to melt away as they held each other tightly. The warmth of their connection filled the room, wrapping them in a cocoon of love and acceptance. As they stood there, a sense of healing washed over them. They were no longer just a broken family. They were a family striving to understand one another. The past would always be a part of them, but it no longer had to define their future. Together, we can find a way forward, Julian whispered, his voice filled with conviction. Eliana nodded, her heart swelling with hope. We can heal, and we can be a family. Celeste, still in their embrace, felt a sense of belonging she had longed for. The shadows of the past began to recede, replaced by the warmth of newfound understanding. The journey ahead would be difficult, but they would face it together, bound by the threads of love and the promise of a brighter future.